Hannah and Arthur have been married for 19 years. They have 3 wonderful children. The oldest, Maya, turned 18 this year. Their second child, Andre, was in elementary school, and the youngest, Teresa, was just under 5 years old. They were a typical middle-class family living in the suburbs of Boston. Hannah worked as an accountant at a car dealership, while Arthur owned a small construction company that specialized in repairing private homes. The family lived in a 2-story house in one of the quiet neighborhoods where people rarely appeared on the streets after sunset. Neighbors mostly saw each other early in the morning when everyone scattered to their business. Only on Sundays did the community gather together to attend church. Hannah was an extremely sensitive and impulsive person. Any event related to factors beyond her control would throw her into a panic attack. At work, she was always the most diligent and was terrified of being fired. Unconsciously, she burdened her children with her attention to detail and fussiness. Their eldest daughter, Maya, was already starting to rebel against her parents' control. At her age, teenagers tend to become more aggressive and willful. Maya often disappeared in the evenings with her boyfriend and would not come home until midnight. Her behavior drove Hannah crazy. She couldn't sleep until her daughter returned home, and there would often be a big argument once Maya returned. Hannah would create a scene and criticize her daughter for her behavior. On the other hand, the father was always on Mia's side and tried to convince his wife that such behavior was normal for her age. One morning, the family was having breakfast at the table as usual. Arthur seemed particularly excited that day. It was Saturday, and he was supposed to have the day off, but he said he urgently needed to go check out a client's house. Hannah was sitting at the table with her children, getting ready to take them to school. She would drop off the younger ones herself, but Maya went to college with her boyfriend. While the kids were having breakfast, Hannah noticed Arthur's phone on the table. He had left it behind in a hurry and drove off. Hannah wanted to move the phone from the table and take it to the bedroom so the kids wouldn't accidentally break it. When she picked up the phone, a message appeared on the screen from a woman named Sophie saying that she would call Arthur on his second phone. Hannah immediately felt a tremble. For a moment, she stopped hearing everything that was happening around her. Her mind was in chaos. The first thing she thought was that her husband was cheating on her. While Hannah was frozen with shock, Andre dropped his mug on the floor with a loud bang, shattering it. Hannah put her husband's phone in her pocket and took the kids to school, then went to work. All day long, Hannah couldn't stop thinking about the message she had seen on Arthur's phone. She didn't know how to act if her husband was really cheating on her. Their relationship had been strained in recent years. Her husband showed little interest in her, stopped giving her gifts, and didn't even ask how she was doing. That same evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Arthur remembered his forgotten phone, and Hannah silently handed it to him. That was just her nature, always afraid to speak up. Hannah kept quiet, and Arthur didn't even give any indication that something was wrong. Several months passed, and Arthur started leaving on urgent business trips more often, coming home late. Hannah was terrified at the thought of being alone. She couldn't imagine what she would do if her husband left her. Everything seemed to suggest that Arthur had a mistress, and he didn't even try to hide it. One day, a middle-aged woman in an eccentric outfit walked into the car dealership where Hannah worked. She looked like a gypsy from the outside. None of the consultants paid any attention to her. All the salespeople were serving clients in suits who looked like they could afford to buy a car in cash. A woman was walking around the showroom, looking at cars. She stopped at a bright red, expensive SUV and began to examine it closely. Hannah saw that none of the consultants were going to serve her, so she decided to do it herself. She approached the mysterious woman and asked how she could help her. In response, the woman in the bright dress said that it wasn't her who needed help, but Hannah. She looked at her with compassion in her eyes. Hannah had a momentary feeling that the mysterious gypsy woman was reading her thoughts. As it turned out, that was exactly what was happening. For days on end, Hannah had been thinking about how to save her family, and the guest at the car dealership saw it all. Without saying a word, the gypsy woman handed Marie a business card. From what was written on the card, Hannah understood that the woman's name was Zemfira, and she was practicing alchemy to make love potions for men. It was probably a profitable business, since while Hannah was reading the card, Zemfira called over a sales consultant and asked him to process her purchase of a red SUV for cash. The gypsy woman stayed in the car dealership for about half an hour. All that time, Hannah watched her but didn't dare to approach her. There was a phone number on the card, so she decided it would be better to call her later. Zemfira drove away in her new SUV, and Marie was left alone with her thoughts. On that same evening, Arthur, as always, returned home late. Hannah was lying in bed and couldn't fall asleep. When her husband returned, she pretended to be asleep. As soon as Arthur entered the bedroom, Hannah smelled a woman's perfume. It was all clear to her. He lay in bed for a long time with his phone, texting his mistress. At that moment, Hannah firmly decided to call the gypsy woman the next day. The next day, Hannah still didn't dare to call Zemfira, but instead wrote her a letter explaining her situation. The gypsy woman replied with a recipe that listed various ingredients for a potion. Zemfira said that the potion had to be made after midnight and given to her husband with tea. On that same day, Hannah bought everything she needed. In this story, we won't list all the ingredients of the potion to prevent readers from harm. Let's just say that the potion required crushed human hair of the person you want to enchant. Hannah prepared the potion and added it to Arthur's tea. Since then, several weeks have passed. Arthur didn't change immediately. His behavior gradually changed. Time and time again, he began to show signs of attention to Hannah. Once he ordered her a bouquet of flowers at work, and that same evening, he invited her to a fancy restaurant for a date. Hannah breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the danger had passed her by. She even wrote a letter of thanks to Zemfira and transferred a modest sum to her card. But the gypsy didn't respond. One night, Hannah woke up in a cold sweat. Her body refused to obey her. The woman couldn't understand what was happening to her and was terrified that she couldn't say a word. She could only watch and listen. She glanced around the room and couldn't see anything, but for some reason, Hannah felt that there was someone else in the room. Someone's silent presence troubled the consciousness of the paralyzed woman. She wanted to turn to Arthur and signal to him in some way, but Arthur wasn't in the bed. Every sound, every creak of the wooden floor made her jump. She wanted to scream and run out of the room, but her body was not under her control. She was forced to lie helpless and watch. She hoped that Arthur had gone to the bathroom and would return soon. For a moment, Hannah thought she heard someone's breathing over her. The bed where she was lying was against the wall, but Hannah couldn't turn her head to look at it. She knew for sure that someone was there. She could even feel the warmth coming from behind her. Terror engulfed the poor woman. She felt sweat running down her forehead and stinging her eyes. Then she felt the bed jerk as if someone had pushed off from the headboard and jumped. Hannah heard the chandelier on the ceiling move. She looked up, but there was nothing there. Marie exhaled and lowered her gaze, seeing a silhouette at the foot of the bed. The silhouette was facing away from her and resembled a skinny monkey the size of a human. Hannah silently cried out in despair. The silhouette began to whisper quietly, I love. In an instant, the creature turned to face Hannah with lightning speed, and she saw her husband in it. Arthur was disfigured. His arms and legs were skinny and seemed too long. The nails on his fingers were torn off, and some black liquid was flowing out of his mouth. The creature twisted unnaturally and screamed at the top of its lungs. Hannah lost consciousness.